They told her destiny would be unmistakable, that when the moon goddess chose her mate, he would arrive crowned in power, radiant, dominant, undeniable. Luna Elara believed them. So when fate finally stirred, she looked past the boy scrubbing blood and grease from palace floors. She ordered him, dismissed him, never once imagined the truth. Because the scullery boy she humiliated was not a servant. He was her mate, or alpha, her future king. And by the time the bond ignited, the entire realm would learn one unforgettable lesson. Destiny does not ask permission, and love often arrives wearing the wrong name. The moon hall had been polished to a mirror shine, every marble tile scrubbed until it reflected the silver glow of the sacred braziers. Luna Elara stood at its center, spine straight, chin lifted, fingers laced calmly before her, the very image of composure. If expectation itself could take human form, it would have worn her face. Tonight was no ordinary night. Tonight, destiny was meant to show its hand. "Elbows in," her handmaid whispered for the third time, fussing with the fall of Elara's ceremonial sleeves. Elara did not look at her. "They are in," she replied coolly. "You're imagining flaws." The handmaid shrank back, chastened. Everyone did that eventually. Elara had been raised for this moment, this exact moment, since she was old enough to walk beneath the moonlit arches of the palace. As the only daughter of the Alpha King and his Luna, she had learned early that fate was not a wild thing. Fate was orderly, predictable, regal. And her mate, when he appeared, would be the same. She had no doubt about it. He would be tall, obviously tall, broad-shouldered, with the unmistakable bearing of command. His presence would silence rooms, bend the air, demand attention without asking. The mate bond, when it snapped into place, would be immediate and undeniable. There would be no confusion, no hesitation, no mess. Certainly no surprises. Elara allowed herself a small, private smile as the moon priestesses took their places along the outer ring of the hall. Their white robes whispered against the floor, their silver circlets catching the firelight. Outside, the court gathered, alphas from allied packs, nobles, generals and envoys, all here to witness the sacred moon calling. They were here to see her future arrive. "Luna Elara," intoned High Priestess Morwen, her voice echoing softly, "daughter of the moon-bound throne. Are you prepared to meet what the goddess has chosen for you?" Elara lifted her gaze, eyes steady, confident. "I am prepared," she said, because she had never doubted it. The truth, one she would never speak aloud, was that she believed the goddess would not dare disappoint her. Years of pressure had honed her certainty to a blade. The pack needed a powerful mate at her side. The council needed reassurance. The people needed a symbol. And Elara needed perfection. The moon calling began. Silver light spilled from the open oculus in the ceiling, bathing the hall in a glow that made skin shimmer and breath catch. The air thickened, humming with ancient magic. Elara felt it settle against her bones, familiar and comforting like a well-worn crown. This was how it would happen, she thought. He would step forward from the crowd, perhaps a visiting alpha she had already noticed, one whose strength had quietly impressed her. Their eyes would meet. The world would tilt. The bond would roar awake. Simple, elegant, predictable. The minutes stretched. A ripple of anticipation moved through the crowd. And then, nothing. The light dimmed. The hum faded. The moon calling ended. A murmur rose, confused and uncertain. Elara remained still, smile frozen on her lips. High Priestess Morwen frowned, glancing up at the oculus, then back at Elara. "It appears," she said slowly, carefully, "that the goddess has chosen patience." Patience. The word landed like an insult. Elara inclined her head with practiced grace, though heat crept up her neck. Then we will wait, she said, because Luna did not falter in public. But inside, irritation coiled sharp and tight. This was not how it was supposed to go. The court dispersed awkwardly, whispers trailing behind them like smoke. Elara turned on her heel and swept from the hall, her attendants scrambling to keep pace. "Double the guard," she ordered briskly. "I don't want speculation turning into scandal." "Yes, my Luna." She barely heard them. The moon goddess did not make mistakes. That much was true. Which meant this delay was intentional. Test, perhaps. Or a sign. Elara disliked tests. The kitchens of the palace were a different world entirely. Steam curled thick and hot against the stone ceiling, carrying the scent of bread, broth, and scorched onions. The clatter of pots and shouted orders echoed endlessly, chaotic and loud. Everything Elara avoided unless absolutely necessary. Which was why her presence there the following morning caused near panic. She swept in like winter itself, silver cloak brushing against crates of turnips and sacks of grain. Cooks froze mid-motion. Servants dropped into hasty bows. "What is that?" Elara demanded, pointing sharply toward the far corner. No one answered immediately. In the corner stood a young man. "No boy," she corrected, elbows deep in sudsy water, scrubbing a stack of blackened pots. His dark hair was tied back messily, damp with sweat. His tunic was plain, worn thin at the seams and smeared with soot. He looked up startled. And Elara stared. This was not destiny. He was unremarkable. Broad enough perhaps, but slouched, shoulders rounded from labor. His hands were rough. His boots muddy. A faint smudge of ash streaked his cheek. And yet, something tugged low in her chest, sharp and unexpected like a snapped string. She scowled, instantly annoyed. "What are you staring at?" she snapped. The boy blinked once, then bowed. Awkwardly, clumsily. "Apologies, my Luna. I didn't realize." "Clearly," she interrupted. "Why is a scullery boy loitering instead of working?" "I am working," he said, glancing down at the pots, a flicker of amusement crossing his eyes before he masked it. Elara missed it entirely. "Well, you're doing it badly," she declared. "Those are still filthy. And you're dripping water all over the floor." "Yes, my Luna," he said smoothly. She hesitated, irritation deepening as that strange pull stirred again. Unwelcome, confusing. She dismissed it at once. Ridiculous. "Your name," she demanded. "Rhys," he replied. "Just Rhys." Course it was just Rhys. Elara turned away, already losing interest. "See that you do better. I won't tolerate incompetence in my palace." "As you wish," Rhys said, voice calm, respectful, and faintly amused. She paused, something about his tone prickling at her pride, but she refused to give it attention. He was nothing. A servant. A speck of dust in the grand machinery of her life. Destiny did not arrive covered in soap suds. As she swept out of the kitchens, Rhys watched her go, lips tugging into a quiet smile. "Oh, Luna," he murmured under his breath. "This is going to be fun." And far above them both, unseen and laughing softly, the moon goddess waited. If anyone had asked Luna Elara later when her life first began to unravel, she would not have said the moon calling. She would not have said destiny delayed or the goddess's silence. She would have said with simmering irritation, the scullery boy. Rhys. The name followed her through the day like an itch she could not scratch. Elara sat in the solar council chamber, sunlight slanting through tall arched windows, catching in her hair and turning it to pale gold. The elders droned on about trade routes and patrol schedules, their voices blurring together. She nodded when expected, spoke when required, but her focus slipped, unmoored. Because every time she closed her eyes, she saw soot-smudged fingers and an infuriatingly calm smile. Ridiculous, she scolded herself. He was nothing. Less than nothing. A servant whose presence should have vanished from her mind the moment she left the kitchens. Yet, when the council finally adjourned, Elara rose abruptly. "I will walk," she announced, ignoring the surprised looks from her guards. "My Luna," one began. "I said I will walk." They fell back at once. The palace corridors were cool and echoing, lined with tapestries depicting glorious hunts and ancient victories. Elara moved quickly, skirts whispering against the stone. She told herself she was inspecting the palace, that she was asserting authority after the moon calling's complication. She did not tell herself she was heading toward the lower halls. The servant wing smelled faintly of soap and baked bread. Elara slowed, irritation flaring again. This was beneath her. Entirely beneath her. And yet her feet carried her onward. The kitchens were louder than before, chaos in full swing as preparations for the midday meal reached their peak. Cooks shouted. Servants rushed past carrying trays. No one noticed her at first, until someone did, and then panic rippled outward. "My Luna!" Elara lifted a hand. "Enough. I'm not here to disrupt you." Her gaze flicked automatically toward the scullery corner. Rhys was there again. Course he was. This time, he was hauling a heavy bucket of water, muscles in his forearms flexing as he set it down. His tunic clung damply to his back, darkened with sweat. He straightened, wiping his brow with his sleeve, and froze when he saw her. Something unreadable passed through his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or amusement. Elara's irritation sharpened. "You," she said sharply. Rhys bowed again, slightly less clumsy than before. "My Luna, why are you still here?" He blinked. "Because I work here." A few nearby servants sucked in quiet breaths. Elara narrowed her eyes. "Watch your tone." "My apologies," he said easily. "I meant no disrespect." She should have dismissed him. Should have turned away and left. Instead she heard herself say, "Come here." Rhys obeyed without hesitation, crossing the kitchen toward her. As he drew closer, that strange sensation returned, stronger now. A low hum beneath her skin. A pull that made her breath catch before she could stop it. She scowled harder, furious at herself. "You're new," she said. "Yes." "From where?" "Nowhere important." That answer alone should have earned punishment. Elara's fingers curled at her sides. "You don't decide what's important." "No," Rhys agreed calmly. "You do." There it was again, that faint curve of his mouth like he was in on some private joke. Elara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Then I decide you need supervision," she snapped. "You'll serve in the upper halls today." The head cook sputtered. "My Luna, he's barely trained." "Then consider it a learning opportunity," Elara said coolly. "Unless you wish to argue." "No, my Luna." Rhys inclined his head. "As you wish." She turned sharply and strode out, not bothering to see if he followed. He did. The upper halls were a world apart from the kitchens, quiet, refined, hushed beneath high ceilings and polished stone. Rhys's boots echoed faintly as he walked behind her, gaze taking everything in with open curiosity. Elara noticed. "Eyes down," she ordered. "Yes, my Luna," he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. She stopped abruptly. He nearly collided with her. "Do you find this amusing?" she demanded. "Amusing?" he echoed, genuinely puzzled. "No." She searched his face for mockery and found none. Only calm. And something else. Interest, perhaps. Or patience. It unsettled her. "You will carry messages," she said briskly, turning again. "Fetch scrolls. Stand where you're told. And you will not speak unless spoken to." Rhys nodded. "Understood." They passed through corridor after corridor, Elara issuing orders with mounting irritation as Rhys fulfilled each one flawlessly. He moved quickly, efficiently, never complaining, even when she sent him back and forth unnecessarily, which she absolutely did on purpose. Still he did not falter. By mid-afternoon, Elara was more frustrated than she had been in weeks. This was supposed to humiliate him, to remind him of his place. Instead, every accidental brush of his hand when he passed her a scroll sent that infuriating hum skittering through her veins. Every time he met her gaze, respectful, steady, it unsettled something she refused to name. At one point, as she leaned over a balcony railing to observe the training grounds below, Rhys stepped closer to pass behind her. Too close. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed. She caught his scent, clean beneath the soap and sweat, something warm and grounding that made her knees go weak. She straightened sharply, heart racing. "Watch yourself." "Apologies," he murmured. "I didn't realize I was that close." "Liar," some instinct whispered. Elara shoved the thought away. When evening finally fell, she dismissed him with a sharp wave. "You're done." Rhys bowed. "Thank you, my Luna." She watched him retreat down the corridor, irritation and confusion tangling tight in her chest. This was wrong. She was Luna. He was a servant. Destiny did not tug at Scullery boys. Yet, that night, Elara dreamed of silver eyes and laughter she could not see, and she woke with the unsettling sense that she had already stepped onto a path she could no longer leave. Far below, in the servant quarters, Rhys lay back on his narrow cot, hands folded behind his head, staring at the ceiling with a slow, thoughtful smile. "So sure," he murmured to the empty room. "So very sure of destiny." The moon goddess, unseen, smiled wider. By the third day, Luna Elara was convinced the Scullery boy was a personal affliction sent by the moon goddess herself. Not a punishment. No, that implied guilt. This was something worse. Provocation. She stood before the tall mirror in her private chamber as dawn bled pale gold through the curtains, her maid fastening the lunar clasp at her throat. Elara studied her reflection critically. Perfect posture. Immaculate braids. Not a single strand out of place. Control restored. "Today," she said coolly, "I will not be distracted." The maid nodded fervently, as if distraction were a contagious disease. And then, as if summoned by the very act of denial, a knock sounded. "My Luna," a guard called softly. "The SC Rhys has arrived with the morning reports." Elara closed her eyes for a fraction of a second. "Send him in," she said, already irritated with herself for the faint quickening of her pulse. Rhys entered carrying a stack of scrolls almost too large for his arms. He was cleaner today, hair tied back neatly, tunic freshly washed, but the effect only made him more irritating. Less grime meant more presence, and Elara did not appreciate the way her attention snagged on him against her will. He bowed. "Morning, my Luna." She accepted the scrolls without touching his hands. "You're late." "I was early," he said calmly. But another servant tripped in. "I didn't ask for explanations," she snapped. "I asked for punctuality." Rhys inclined his head. "Of course." There was again. That infuriating calm. No defensiveness. No fear. No scrambling to please. Elara turned sharply. "You'll accompany me today." Rhys blinked. "All day?" "Yes," she said, because the idea had already formed, sharp, petty, and deeply satisfying. "You'll learn what real service looks like." If he was surprised, he didn't show it. "As you wish." She led him through the palace with clipped steps, issuing orders like thrown daggers. "Hold that." "Stand there." "No, not there. At one point, she made him carry an ornamental lunar basin from one end of the hall to the other. Twice. Only to decide she didn't want it moved after all. Nearby courtiers watched in barely concealed fascination. Rhys said nothing. He only adjusted his grip and obeyed. By midday, Elara was running out of excuses to torment him, and growing increasingly unsettled by the fact that he still hadn't broken. Instead, she was the one unraveling. They were in the library when it happened. Elara reached for a high shelf, fingers stretching toward a thick, leather-bound tome. She rose onto her toes, irritated when she still couldn't quite reach it. Before she could snap for assistance, Rhys stepped close, too close, and reached past her. His chest brushed her back. The book slid free. So did her breath. For a suspended, dangerous moment, the world narrowed to the warmth at her spine and the steady rhythm of his breathing. The hum surged sharp and undeniable, racing through her veins like moonlight through silver. Elara spun around, fury blazing far too bright for the offense. "Do not touch me." "I didn't," Rhys said quietly, hands already lifted in surrender. "I touched the book." She stared at him, chest rising too fast, heart hammering as if she'd been running. The audacity of it. The confusion of it. "Leave," she said sharply. "Wait outside." Rhys hesitated, just a fraction of a second, then nodded and retreated. Elara pressed her palm flat against the shelf, steadying herself. This was absurd. Her body was reacting to proximity, nothing more. A trick of scent, of stress, of unmet expectations. She was Luna. She was disciplined. She would not be undone by a scullery boy. The afternoon descended into chaos. Elara sent Rhys to deliver a message to the Eastern Tower, only to realize moments later she'd given him the wrong scroll. She stormed after him, only to find him already returning, correct scroll in hand. "You gave me the wrong one," he said mildly. "I thought you might want this instead." She snatched it from him. "You thought wrong." Noted. Later, she ordered him to oversee the arrangement of ceremonial cushions for an upcoming feast. He did so efficiently, too efficiently, earning him an irritated glare. "You're enjoying this," she accused. Rhys paused, hands resting on a cushion embroidered with lunar sigils. "Enjoying serving my Luna?" "Yes," she snapped. "That." He considered her for a long moment, eyes thoughtful. "I enjoy watching you," he said honestly. "You're very precise." Her mouth opened and closed again. "That was not permission to observe me," she said stiffly. A smile tugged at his lips. "Understood." By the time evening approached, Elara was exhausted in a way she had not been in years. Not from labor, but from restraint. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong. That the air between them was too charged. That destiny was pressing close, laughing softly. She refused to listen. At dinner, she sat at the high table, expression serene, while Rhys stood discreetly behind a pillar like any other servant. And yet she could feel him, an awareness that made her skin prickle, her senses sharpen. When she finally rose, the relief was palpable. "Rhys," she said curtly. "You're dismissed." He bowed. "Good night, my Luna." As he turned to go, one of the younger courtiers leaned toward her, eyes bright with mischief. "You've taken a liking to your scullery boy." Elara froze. "I have not," she said coldly. The courtier smiled. "If you say so." Elara swept from the hall, fury simmering. In the quiet of the corridor, Rhys allowed himself a low chuckle. "Oh, Luna," he murmured, glancing upward as if he could see through stone and sky. "How long do you think you can keep pretending?" Above them all, the moon goddess watched with gleeful patience. And destiny, patient no longer, leaned closer. By the fourth morning, Luna Elara had reached a troubling conclusion. The scullery boy was doing this on purpose. She woke before dawn, moonlight still clinging to the edges of her chamber, heart already restless. The dreams had grown worse, vivid flashes of silver eyes, steady hands, laughter warm against her ear. She rose irritated, bathing in cold water as if it might scrub the sensation from her skin. Did not. By the time she dressed, her patience was already frayed. "Summon Rhys," she told her guard curtly. The guard blinked. "My Luna." "Now." Rhys arrived moments later, hair still damp, tunic half-laced as though he'd been pulled from sleep. The sight should have pleased her. Instead, it made her stomach twist. "You look unprepared," she said sharply. "I was asleep," he replied honestly. "But I can return later." "No," she snapped. "You'll stay." He bowed. "As you wish." She sent him on errands that made no sense even to her, fetching items from opposite wings of the palace, carrying messages she could have delivered herself, standing guard over doors that required no guarding. Still, he endured it all with quiet competence. The first mishap came mid-morning. Elara was inspecting the storage vaults when she ordered Rhys to retrieve a sealed crate from a high shelf. He climbed a ladder, muscles taut as he reached overhead. "Be careful," she said automatically. He glanced down at her, surprised. "I always am." The crate slipped anyway. Elara lunged without thinking, arms shooting up. The crate crashed harmlessly to the floor, but she did not notice, because Rhys had fallen with it. He caught himself at the last second, one hand gripping the ladder, the other braced against the wall beside her head. His body hovered inches from hers, breath warm against her cheek. They froze. The bond surged like lightning. Elara gasped, heart slamming violently against her ribs. She could smell him, soap, warmth, something deeper that made her knees weaken. Her fingers curled reflexively into the front of his tunic. Rhys's eyes darkened. For a heartbeat too long, neither moved. Then Elara shoved him back with more force than necessary. "Watch what you're doing." "I was," he said quietly. "I was watching you." Heat flooded her face. "Get down. Carefully." He obeyed, movements controlled, but his gaze never left her. Elara turned away sharply, pulse racing. That should never happen again. The second incident was worse. Elara summoned Rhys to the council archives, a narrow room lined floor to ceiling with ancient scrolls. Dust hung thick in the air. She instructed him to reorganize the shelves by date, then seated herself at the lone desk to observe. To supervise, she told herself. He works silently, methodically. Too methodically. Minutes passed. And more. Elara's irritation flared. "Are you finished yet?" "Nearly," he replied, reaching for the final scroll. The shelf shifted. Dust rained down in a choking cloud. Elara coughed, stepping back, and tripped over the leg of the desk. She would have fallen flat if Rhys hadn't moved instantly. He caught her around the waist, pulling her against him just as the shelf clattered harmlessly to the floor. Her breath left her in a rush. His arms were solid, warm, unmistakably steady. "I've got you," he murmured near her ear. The world tilted. Elara became painfully aware of the way her body fit against his, of the strength in his hands, of the low hum vibrating between them like a living thing. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. She pushed away at once. "Unhand me." He released her immediately, stepping back. "You're safe." She glared at him, shaken and furious. At him, at herself, at the moon goddess most of all. "This ends," she said tightly. "I won't have accidents caused by your incompetence." "Incompetence?" Rhys echoed, brows lifting. "Yes," she snapped. "You are clumsy, disruptive, and entirely inappropriate." His lips twitched. "That's quite the list." "Dismissed," she barked. He bowed and left without another word. Elara sank into the chair, chest heaving. She was losing control. That evening, things went from unsettling to absurd. A formal dinner had been arranged for visiting pack leaders. Elara sat at the high table, regal and composed, while servants moved with careful precision. Rhys was not meant to be among them. And yet there he was, carrying a silver tray piled with goblets. She spotted him instantly. Her jaw tightened. As he approached the table, one of the visiting alphas leaned back too far, knocking into Rhys's arm. Wine sloshed dangerously close to Elara's pristine gown. Rhys twisted at the last second, spilling wine down his own sleeve instead. The hall went silent. Elara stared at the spreading crimson stain on his tunic. "Rhys," she hissed under her breath. "You're bleeding." He glanced down and chuckled softly. "Just wine." She stood abruptly, ignoring the startled murmurs around her. "Ooh. Come with me." She dragged him into a side corridor before anyone could protest. "What were you thinking?" she demanded. "Saving your dress," he replied simply. Her anger faltered. For a moment neither spoke. "You shouldn't have done that," she said finally. "Why not?" "Because..." She stopped herself, fists clenching. "Because you're a servant. And you're Luna," he said gently. "Does that mean I shouldn't protect you?" The question struck too close. Elara turned away, swallowing hard. "This closeness ends," she said. "Effective immediately." Rhys studied her, something serious settling into his expression. "If that's what you want." "It is." He bowed and stepped back. But as he walked away, Elara knew, with a sinking certainty, that whatever this was between them had already gone far beyond her control. And somewhere in the palace, laughter, soft, divine, and utterly merciless, echoed through the night. Luna Elara avoided Rhys for 3 full days. She did not summon him. She did not glance toward the servant corridors. She did not ask who had been assigned to her messages or who stood guard at the periphery of her vision. If she noticed the absence considerately filled by others, she ignored it. This was control, she told herself. This was discipline. And yet the palace felt wrong. Too quiet in some places. Too loud in others. The rhythm she had not known she relied upon, steady footsteps, calm presence, infuriating competence, had vanished, leaving the days oddly disjointed. On the 4th morning, the moon goddess tested her resolve. Elara stood on the eastern balcony, reviewing patrol reports as mist curled through the training grounds below. The air was cool, sharp with early light. She should have been focused. She was not. Her thoughts circled like restless birds, landing always on the same forbidden place. She was halfway through a sentence when a voice spoke behind her. "My Luna." Her hand tightened on the parchment. Slowly she turned. Rhys stood several paces back, head bowed respectfully, posture impeccably correct, clean tunic, boots polished, expression unreadable. Her pulse betrayed her immediately. "I told you," she said coldly, "that I did not require your service." "You didn't," he agreed. "The head steward did." She lifted her chin. "Then you may leave." He did not move. "I was asked to deliver this," he said, holding out a sealed scroll. "It concerns the northern border." She hesitated, then snatched it from his hand without touching him. "You're dismissed." "Yes, my Luna." He turned to go. Something twisted sharply in her chest. "Wait," she said, the word escaping before she could stop it. He paused but did not turn. Elara closed her eyes briefly, steadying herself. "You have been reassigned." "Yes." "To where?" "The outer grounds," he replied. "Heavy labor." She frowned. "Why?" "Beep." "I suspect," he said carefully, "someone thought distance might be wise." Her jaw clenched. "That wasn't she stopped, the rest of the sentence burning on her tongue. "Not my intention. Not my fault. Not my decision." She straightened. "You're dismissed," she repeated, sharper now. This time he left. Elara stared after him long after he was gone, the scroll forgotten in her hand. The days that followed were worse. Without Rhys in the upper halls, accidents multiplied. Messages were misplaced. Orders misunderstood. Servants stumbled nervously in her presence, cowed by her growing impatience. At night, the dreams returned with a vengeance. She dreamed of hands she could not see, of laughter she could almost touch, of a presence at her back, steady and unyielding, that made her feel impossibly safe. She woke angry, restless, frustrated beyond reason. On the 7th day the close call came. A delegation from a rival pack arrived unexpectedly, tensions already simmering from a recent border dispute. Elara received them in the great hall, expression serene, spine straight, every inch the Luna they expected. The negotiations were strained. Voices rose. Tempers flared. And then, as if fate itself had grown bored of subtlety, a shout echoed from the courtyard. Deal rang. Guards surged toward the doors. Elara rose instantly. What is happening? Before anyone could answer, the doors burst open and a wounded guard staggered inside. My Luna, there's been a breach in the outer grounds. Chaos erupted. Elara moved without hesitation. Skirts gathered as she strode toward the doors. Secure the delegation. Double the guard. My Luna, it isn't safe. I said now. She reached the courtyard just as another shout rang out, closer this time. And there, amid the confusion, she saw him. Rhys. He was grappling with an intruder near the outer wall, movements sharp and precise. Gone was the scullery boy's humble posture. Gone was the careful restraint. He moved like a trained warrior. He disarmed the intruder in seconds, twisting the blade free and sending the man crashing to the ground. Elara froze. Her heart stuttered violently. This was not a servant. This was not a laborer. This was someone dangerous. Rhys looked up, and their eyes met across the courtyard. The world seemed to tilt. For a heartbeat, everything else fell away. The shouts, the guards, the intruder struggling beneath Rhys's knee. Only him. Only that steady, infuriating calm. He released the intruder and stepped back, bowing deeply when he saw her. My Luna, he said, as if nothing were amiss. Her pulse roared in her ears. Explain, she demanded, once the immediate threat was contained and the courtyard secured. Rhys stood before her, hands clasped behind his back, posture deceptively relaxed. There was an attempt to breach the wall. I intervened. You're a scullery boy, she said sharply. You don't intervene. I used to do other work, he replied mildly. Her eyes narrowed. What work? He met her gaze evenly. Work that required skill. The answer was insufficient. Insultingly so. Before she could press further, the head of the guard rushed over, breathless. My Luna, the situation is under control. We owe this man thanks. He prevented serious damage. Elara did not look away from Rhys. Leave us. The guard hesitated, then obeyed. Silence stretched between them. You lied to me, she said. I withheld, he corrected gently. You didn't ask. Her hands curled into fists. You allowed me to treat you as lesser. I allowed you to see what you expected, he replied. The words struck uncomfortably close to the bone. Why? She demanded. He studied her for a long moment, expression unreadable. Because I needed to know. Know what? He took a step closer. Elara did not move. Who you were, he said quietly. Without the weight of prophecy. Without the crown. Her breath caught. That is not your place, she said, though the protest sounded thin even to her own ears. Perhaps not, he agreed. But destiny has a sense of humor. The hum stirred, stronger now than ever. No longer ignorable. No longer deniable. Elara stepped back sharply, shaken. This conversation is over. Rhys inclined his head. As you wish. But as he turned away, she knew that something fundamental had shifted. The scullery boy mask was cracking. And beneath it lay a truth she was no longer sure she wanted to avoid. Above them the moon goddess watched, her patience finally thinning. Soon, she promised silently. Very soon. Elara did not sleep that night. She lay rigid beneath silk sheets, moonlight striping the chamber floor, replaying the courtyard again and again. The ease with which Rhys had moved. The certainty in his stance. The way the guards had deferred to him without question. Scullery boys did not disarm intruders. Scullery boys did not carry themselves like men accustomed to command. And scullery boys most certainly did not ignite something ancient and aching beneath her skin. By dawn, Elara had reached another troubling conclusion. She had been wrong. The realization tasted bitter. She rose before her attendants arrived and dressed herself, fingers tight and precise. If Rhys was not what he claimed, if he had misrepresented himself within her palace, then she would uncover the truth. Swiftly, quietly, on her terms. She summoned the head steward. "I want everything you have on Rhys," she said without preamble. Where he came from. Who recommended him. When he arrived. The steward hesitated. "My Luna." He was assigned through the lower registry. No family name. No recorded lineage. Elara's jaw tightened. "Everyone has a lineage." "Yes, my Luna." But his papers were unusually clean. That was not reassurance. Where is he now? The outer grounds. Assigned to the wall repairs. Elara dismissed the steward and paced the length of her chamber, irritation sharpening into resolve. If Rhys thought he could play games with her, if this was some elaborate deception, she would remind him precisely who held power. The outer grounds were a sprawl of stone, scaffolding, and laborers moving beneath the watchful eyes of guards. Elara's arrival sent a ripple through the workers. Tools stilled. Backs straightened. Heads bowed. Rhys was near the far wall, lifting heavy stone blocks as if they weighed nothing at all. He saw her immediately. Of course he did. He set the stone down and bowed, sweat darkening his collar. "My Luna." She stopped several paces from him. "Walk with me." A guard moved to follow. "No," Elara said sharply. "Stay." The guard obeyed reluctantly. Rhys fell into step beside her as they moved along the wall, the space between them carefully maintained. Too carefully. "You fight well," Elara said, eyes forward. "I do," he agreed. "You didn't mention it. You didn't ask." Her gaze flicked toward him, sharp. "You enjoy provoking me." A corner of his mouth lifted. "I enjoy honesty." "Then be honest now," she said. "Who are you?" He considered the question, steps unhurried. "Someone passing through." "That's not an answer." "No," he agreed. "But it's the truth I'm prepared to give." Elara stopped walking. He stopped too. They faced each other, the wall rising behind them, the sounds of labor fading into distant noise. "You are in my palace," she said quietly. "You answer to me." "Yes," he said just as quietly. "And still, there are things you haven't asked." Her breath caught, anger flaring bright and hot. "Do not toy with me." "I wouldn't dare," he said. "Not with you." The words landed with uncomfortable weight. "Then explain the courtyard," she demanded. "Explain your training. Explain why the bond." She stopped herself sharply. Rhys's eyes darkened. "The what?" he asked softly. "Nothing," she snapped. For a moment, he studied her as if seeing past the crown, past the command, into the woman beneath. The hum surged between them, no longer subtle, no longer ignorable. It pressed at her ribs, urging, insisting. "Elara," he said, using her name for the first time. Her heart stuttered violently. "Do not." "I won't lie to you," he continued. "But I won't strip away every truth just because you demand it." She lifted her chin, defiant. You think I'm afraid of the truth. I think, he said gently, you're afraid of what it might ask of you. The words struck too close. Elara turned away abruptly. This conversation is over. As you wish, he said again. But this time there was something different in his tone. Something heavier. Something like regret. The clue came that evening. Elara sat alone in the moon hall, fingers tracing the etched runes along the arm of her throne. The space felt too large without the court present, the echoes too sharp. She needed certainty. She summoned High Priestess Morwen under the pretense of discussing the moon calling's delay. The older woman arrived promptly, silver eyes keen. The goddess is patient, Morwen said, settling beside her. But she does not forget. Elara, she corrected gently. The goddess does not bend to expectations. Elara stiffened. Then why the delay? Morwen's gaze softened. Sometimes the bond appears before recognition. Sometimes it tests. Elara's fingers tightened. Tests what? Pride, Morwen said without hesitation. Certainty. The ability to see worth where you least expect it. The words echoed too closely to Rhys's own. Elara rose abruptly. That will be all. Morwen studied her for a long moment, then inclined her head. When the truth reveals itself, child, it will not ask permission. Left alone, Elara pressed her palm to her chest, breath shallow. She did not want this. She did not want a destiny that arrived disguised. She did not want a mate she had overlooked, dismissed, ordered about. She wanted certainty, control, the world as it had always been. Yet, as night deepened, her thoughts returned unbidden to the courtyard, to the wall, to the steady calm in Rhys's eyes. To the way the bond hummed louder with every passing day. Far below, in the quiet of the outer grounds, Rhys leaned against the stone wall, gaze lifted to the moon. She's close, he murmured to the night. Angry. Stubborn. The moonlight seemed to pulse in response. Soon, he added softly. I know. And high above them both, the moon goddess smiled. Not with patience now, but with anticipation. The mask was cracking. The reveal was inevitable. Elara lasted exactly 2 more days before confronting the truth. Or rather, before the truth cornered her. The palace was preparing for the moon vigil, a solemn night when the court gathered beneath open sky to honor the goddess and reaffirm loyalty to the crown. Every detail mattered. Every movement was observed. Elara moved through the preparations with mechanical precision, issuing orders, correcting placements, nodding at reports. She did not look toward the outer grounds. She did not ask for Rhys. And yet, by late afternoon, his presence pressed at her awareness like a held breath. My Luna, the head steward said carefully, falling into step beside her. We have a complication. Stop. Explain. One of the ceremonial braziers cracked during transport. We require someone strong enough to replace it before nightfall. Elara already knew what was coming. And the only one available with the strength and speed required is Rhys. Her jaw tightened. Send guards. They won't reach the upper terrace in time, the steward said. The vigil cannot be delayed. Silence stretched. Elara exhaled sharply. Fine. Send him. Rhys arrived minutes later, sleeves rolled, expression unreadable. He bowed deep and respectful. My Luna. You will replace the brazier on the upper terrace, she said briskly. You will not speak unless necessary. As you wish. They climbed the narrow stone steps together, the air growing cooler with every turn. The terrace opened to the sky, vast and exposed, moon already rising pale and watchful above them. The cracked brazier lay near the edge, dangerously close to the drop. Rhys assessed it once, then moved without hesitation. He lifted the heavy metal structure with controlled ease, muscles tensing as he carried it aside. Elara watched despite herself. No servant moved like that. As he set the replacement brazier into place, the wind shifted sharply, whipping Elara's cloak around her legs. She stepped back, and her heel slipped on loose gravel. She cried out, arms flailing. Rhys turned instantly. He crossed the distance in 2 strides and caught her, one arm locking around her waist, the other bracing her shoulder. The world lurched and then stilled. They stood at the terrace edge, her weight pressed fully against him. The bond detonated. There was no gentle hum this time, no subtle pull. It surged between them like a living force, hot and undeniable, flooding her senses until she gasped. Her hands fisted in his tunic. His breath hitched. "Elara," he whispered, voice rough. She froze. Not because of the wind. Not because of the height. Because he had said her name like a vow. She pulled back sharply, breaking contact, heart hammering painfully. "Do not touch me." "I saved you," he said, jaw tight. "I did not ask you to." "No," he agreed softly. "You didn't." Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. Frustration, restraint, something held too long. "This ends now," Elara said, voice shaking despite her effort. "I know you're hiding something. I know you've been testing me." Rhys stared at her for a long moment. Then he exhaled slowly. "You're right," he said. Her breath caught. "About what?" "About this going too far." Relief and anger tangled painfully in her chest. "Then you will tell me the truth." He hesitated. "Just once. It was enough." "Say it," she demanded. He stepped back, putting deliberate space between them. "Not here. Not like this. You will not dictate terms to me." "I'm not," he said quietly. "I'm protecting you." The words ignited her fury. "From what?" she snapped. "From my own destiny." Rhys's eyes lifted to the moon, and for the first time, something like sorrow crossed his face. "From the humiliation," he said softly. "From realizing how cruel expectations can be." The words struck deep. Elara recoiled as if slapped. "Get out of my sight." Rhys bowed, slowly, deeply. "As you wish, my Luna." He turned and walked away, leaving her standing beneath the moon, chest aching, mind reeling. The vigil passed in a blur. Elara stood before her people, radiant and composed, reciting prayers she barely heard. The goddess's light washed over her, heavy and insistent. "You are close," it seemed to whisper. She did not sleep that night. Just before dawn, the final clue arrived. A sealed report was delivered to her private chamber, unsigned, unmarked. Inside was a single line, written in an elegant, disciplined hand. "The Alpha King Rydian of the Western Reach has not been seen in his territory for weeks." Elara's blood went cold. "Rydian." Rhys. The room seemed to tilt. Memories slammed together. The strength, the calm authority, the guard's instinctive respect, the way destiny screamed every time he came near. Her hands trembled. She had mistaken a king for a servant. And the prank, whether divine or deliberate, was about to become public. Far below, as the first light of dawn touched the palace walls, Rydian stood alone, gaze lifted toward her tower. "Tomorrow," he murmured. "No more hiding." Above them all, the moon goddess smiled. The unraveling was complete. Elara confronted him at sunrise. Not in the council chamber. Not beneath the moonlit arches. But in the one place where truth had first dared to touch her, where soot and soap had stained her certainty. The kitchens. The palace was only just waking. Fires crackled low. Bread rose beneath linen cloths. Servants moved quietly, startled into bows as Elara swept through with unannounced fury in her wake. Rhys was there. Course he was. He stood at the scullery basin, sleeves rolled, hands submerged in water as if nothing in the world had changed. As if he were not a king masquerading as a servant. As if destiny itself were not bearing down on them both. "Stop!" Her voice cut through the room like a blade. Everything stilled. Rhys looked up slowly. Their eyes met, and something in his expression shifted. Acceptance, perhaps, or resignation. The game, she realized, was over. "Leave us," Elara commanded. The servants scattered at once, fleeing like startled birds. Within moments, only the two of them remained, the air thick with steam and unspoken truths. She advanced on him, each step measured, controlled, though her heart pounded violently in her chest. "How long," she said quietly, "were you planning to lie to me?" He dried his hands on a cloth before answering. "I never lied." Her laugh was sharp and humorless. "You let me believe you were nothing. I let you believe what you wanted to see," he said evenly. She stopped a few paces away. "Your name?" He met her gaze steadily. "Rydian." The sound of it, Rydian, settled into place like a missing piece snapping home. Power rolled off the name. "Authority." "Alpha King of the Western Reach," she said. "Yes." Her breath shuddered. "You scrubbed my floors." A corner of his mouth lifted. "Badly at first." The absurdity of it struck her all at once. The orders, the condescension, the way she had spoken to him, as if he were beneath her. Heat flooded her face. "You let me humiliate you," she said, voice tight. "I let you be honest," Rydian replied softly. "Honest without the crown. Without prophecy whispering in your ear." Anger flared, bright and defensive. "You had no right." "No," he agreed. "I didn't." Silence stretched between them, heavy and electric. "And the bond?" she demanded. "Was that part of your test as well?" Rydian's expression shifted. Serious now. "The bond was never a test. It was the risk." Her throat tightened. "Then why?" He took a step closer, slow, deliberate. "Because I have been chosen for my strength my entire life. Because no one has ever looked at me without seeing a throne. I needed to know, that you could see the man beneath it. And if I couldn't?" she asked hoarsely. "Then I would have left," he said simply. "With my pride bruised, perhaps. But my truth intact." The words struck harder than any accusation. "You watched me dismiss you," she said. "Order you. Belittle you." "Yes. And still you stayed." His gaze softened. "Because even then you protected others. You stood between danger and your people. You saved your dignity by clinging to certainty. But you never once abused power for cruelty's sake." Her chest ached. "I was cruel," she whispered. "You were afraid," he corrected gently. "There's a difference." The bond surged, no longer explosive but deep and steady, like a river finally unblocked. Elara's knees weakened. She sank onto a nearby bench, head in her hands. "I made a fool of myself." Rydian stepped closer but did not touch her. "You made yourself human." She looked up sharply. This was a prank. A flicker of amusement returned to his eyes. "Priceless, I believe." Despite herself, a breath of laughter escaped her, half hysterical, half relieved. "The court will never let me forget this." "I won't let them," he said. "But I might remind you." She stared at him, incredulous. "You're enjoying this?" "Immensely," he admitted. Her laughter came fuller this time, shaky but real. "I ordered you to carry cushions. You were very particular about their alignment. And the basin. Heavy," he said thoughtfully. "But worth it." She groaned, burying her face in her hands again. "I treated a king like a servant. You treated your mate like a man," he said quietly. The words settled into her bones. Slowly she rose to her feet. The distance between them closed, not by steps but by gravity. The bond pulsed warm and sure, no longer asking, only waiting. "You could have told me sooner," she said. "I could have," he agreed. "But would you have listened?" She swallowed. "No." Rhydian smiled faintly. Then perhaps the goddess knew best. Elara studied him, really studied him this time. The strength she had mistaken for labor. The calm she had read as obedience. The humor she had dismissed as insolence. "How do we face them?" she asked softly. "After this. Together," he said without hesitation. "With honesty. And humor." She exhaled slowly. "You're going to enjoy telling this story." "Oh," he said, eyes glinting. "I plan to tell it often." She rolled her eyes, and then unexpectedly reached for his hand. The moment their fingers touched, the bond sealed fully, warm and unbreakable. Not a lightning strike this time, but a quiet certainty. Elara lifted her chin, resolve settling into place at last. "Then let us be seen," she said. "All of us. Crowns and all." Rhydian bowed, not as a servant but as an equal. "As you wish, my Luna." And somewhere above them, the moon goddess laughed, loud, delighted, and utterly satisfied. By midday the palace was buzzing. Rumors traveled faster than ravens, and by the time Elara and Rhydian emerged from the inner halls together, the court had already sensed a shift. Whispers fluttered through the corridors, eyes widened, and every bow seemed a fraction deeper, a fraction more curious. The sight of them side by side silenced the great hall. Rhydian no longer wore the plain tunic of a servant. He stood in dark, tailored regalia marked with the sigil of the Western Reach. His presence unmistakable now, commanding, grounded, impossible to ignore. Elara felt the weight of every gaze. She did not falter. "Attend," she said clearly, her voice carrying to the furthest arch. The court obeyed at once. "This palace," Elara continued, "has always honored destiny as sacred and unerring. Today we are reminded that destiny does not always arrive as expected." A murmur rippled through the gathered nobles. Rhydian stepped forward, inclining his head. "I am Rhydian, Alpha King of the Western Reach. I came to this court unannounced and unadorned by title." Gasps broke through the silence. Elara lifted her chin. "You will note that he was received as any unknown man would be. Not as a king. Not as a mate." She paused deliberately. "But as himself." The tension in the hall eased, just slightly, as curiosity edged out shock. Rhydian's gaze flicked toward her, something warm and amused there. She ignored it and continued. "The moon goddess withheld the bond until understanding could take root," Elara said. "This was not deception for amusement, but a test of humility, patience, and truth." She held up a hand before anyone could speak. "Yes, I was mistaken. Spectacularly." Stun beat. Then a ripple of laughter, tentative at first, then genuine, moved through the hall. Elara allowed a faint smile. "I mistook my mate for a scullery boy," she said plainly. "And in doing so, I learned more about leadership than years of ceremony ever taught me." Rhydian bowed slightly. "For the record," he added dryly, "I was terrible at scrubbing pots." The hall broke into laughter, tension shattering completely. Elara glanced at him sharply, then sighed. "You enjoyed that." "I warned you," he said. The elders conferred in low voices. Then High Priestess Morwen stepped forward, eyes bright with knowing satisfaction. "The moon goddess delights in unconventional truths," she said. "This union is blessed." The final word settled the matter. Cheers erupted. Servants smiled openly. Even the most rigid nobles relaxed, the story already transforming from scandal to legend. Later, in the quieter comfort of the inner gardens, Elara finally exhaled. She sat beside the reflecting pool, crown set aside, fingers trailing through cool water. Rydian joined her, stretching his legs out with casual ease. "You handled that well," he said. "I chose transparency," she replied. "It was that or let others twist the story. And now, she said, they'll twist it themselves but kindly." He chuckled. "We've become a cautionary tale." "A beloved one," she corrected. He studied her for a moment. "Do you regret it?" She met his gaze without hesitation. "No." The word felt solid. "True. I regret my certainty," she added quietly. "Not the path it led me to." He reached for her hand, and this time she did not hesitate. "Then it was worth it." She smiled faintly. "I suppose the moon goddess has a sense of humor. A cruel one. A necessary one." They sat in companionable silence as the sun dipped low, casting gold across the water. "You know," Rydian said thoughtfully, "the servants have already started embellishing the tale." Elara groaned. "How bad?" "Well," he said, eyes glinting, "apparently you made me clean the same basin 7 times. "I did not." "5 then." She rolled her eyes. "This is going to haunt me. Forever." He agreed cheerfully. She laughed despite herself. That evening, as torches lit the palace walkways and music drifted through the air, Elara stood on the balcony overlooking her people. Rydian came to stand beside her. "They accept us," she said quietly. "They accept the story," he corrected. "That's how it always works." She leaned slightly into him. "Then let it be told." He smiled. "I intend to." Below them laughter rose. The tale was already spreading, retold with delight, softened by humor, sharpened by affection. Not a scandal. Legend. And for the first time in her life, Elara felt no need to control how destiny was remembered. She had reclaimed the narrative, not by perfection but by truth. One chapter remained, and this time she welcomed it. The story never stopped being told. Years later, Elara would sometimes stand at the edge of the great hall during feasts and listen as new voices took it up. Embellished, exaggerated, lovingly distorted by time. "There she was," a visiting lord would say, eyes bright with delight, "ordering the poor boy to scrub the same pot until it shone like moonstone." "And there he was," another would add laughing, "an alpha king on his knees in soap and suds, wondering if destiny had truly lost its mind." Elara learned to smile first. It was easier that way. The first months of their rule were a careful dance. Elara remained Luna in every sense. Precise, disciplined, fiercely protective of her people. Rydian ruled at her side not as a shadow or an ornament, but as an equal force. Measured where she was sharp, patient where she was exacting. They argued. Often. "You can't just walk into the guard barracks unannounced," Elara snapped one evening, hands braced on her desk. "I can," Rydian replied calmly. "I did. You're undermining protocol. I'm learning morale." She glared at him. "You're impossible." He smiled. "You ordered me to polish silver until my hands ached. I think we're even." She bit back a laugh and lost. It was that laughter more than anything that changed how the court saw them. Their bond was not brittle with ceremony. Bent. Breathe. It carried warmth through corridors that had long known only reverence. Elara found herself lighter, still formidable, still exacting, but no longer alone beneath the weight of expectation. And Rydian never let her forget. "You know," he said one night as they walked the battlements together, moonlight silvering the stone, "there are servants who still flinch when they see me." She winced. "I have apologized. Publicly. Privately. Repeatedly. And yet," he continued with infuriating cheer, "I suspect some of them enjoy the thought that once, just once, you were wrong." She stopped walking and turned on him. "I was not wrong. I was misinformed." He laughed openly now, the sound carrying into the night. Careful, my Luna. That's not how legends remember it. She reached out and caught his sleeve, pulling him closer. You enjoyed every moment. I enjoyed you, he corrected gently. Learning you. Watching you choose who you wanted to be once certainty fell away. Her expression softened. So did I, she admitted quietly. The moon goddess's favor was evident in small, unmistakable ways. Crops flourished. Border disputes eased. Alliances strengthened. The people began to say, half in jest, half in awe, that laughter itself had become a protective ward over the realm. When asked how they met, Elara stopped deflecting. She told the truth. I mistook my mate for a scullery boy, she would say calmly, watching disbelief bloom into delight. And in doing so, I learned that love does not arrive crowned. It arrives honest. Rydian always added, and slightly damp. Their legacy grew, not as a flawless reign, but as a resilient one. A partnership forged not in prophecy fulfilled neatly, but in expectations dismantled and rebuilt stronger. On the anniversary of the moon vigil, they returned to the terrace where it had nearly unraveled. Elara stood at the edge, the drop no longer frightening. Do you ever wonder, she asked softly, what would have happened if I had recognized you immediately? Rydian considered. I think we would have ruled well. She nodded. But not like this. No, he agreed. We would have missed the joke. She smiled, resting her head briefly against his shoulder. The goddess is cruel. She is precise, he said. She gave us exactly what we needed. Below them the palace glowed with life. Laughter drifted upward. Music followed. Elara straightened, crown catching the moonlight as she lifted her gaze to the sky. Then let it be remembered, she said, voice steady and sure. Not as humiliation, not as trickery, but as proof, Rydian finished, that destiny sometimes wears the wrong clothes. She laughed, free, unburdened, wholly herself. And the moon goddess, watching from her eternal vantage, smiled at the enduring truth she had always known. Love does not bow to expectation. It arrives disguised, inconvenient, and perfectly timed. And those brave enough to laugh when it does, they rule not just with strength but with joy.